Freedom lives here in the moment. Freedom lives here every
Hi,
day.
and welcome to Toussaint Warrior Trials. My name is Ade Toussaint Richardson, and this is a podcast where I talk to various people about the struggles that they've gone through and the steps that they've taken to get through these things. Today, I had the pleasure to sit down with Olivia Eden, owner of the Activation Project. Olivia is a facilitator and has facilitated many people through psychedelic journey. And she talks about the importance of integration and a app that she's actually developed that helps with the integration process. She also talked about some of her personal process with integration and come into the realization that she's had trauma and that the process that she's gone through with dealing with that. Some of the things I didn't really get into or didn't add in this podcast is that Olivia was part of a missionary organization, religious sex cult. She grew up in it as a child and throughout part of her teen. I didn't cover that because I think it was covered really well in a podcast by David Uclair. You can find that on YouTube. So that they go into depth in that. So in this one, we really focused on the integration process and the work that she does. So hope you enjoy this podcast. Please comment, leave questions, and please, if you like this podcast, like, comment, subscribe to our Spotify, our YouTube page, and if you're watching this on Instagram, please follow us there. Thank you. Hi, Olivia.
Hi, thanks for having me.
So I'm going to start with reading your bio. Olivia Eden is a seasoned professional in the field of psychedelics with over 5 years of experience as both a practitioner and an integration specialist. Her journey in this transformative realm began as a passionate facilitator guiding individuals through profound experiences to help them unlock their inner potential. Recognizing the critical importance of integration as a fundamental aspect of the psychedelic journey, Olivia founded the Activation Project, TAP for short. TAP is a pioneering software platform dedicated to simplifying and revolutionizing psychedelic aftercare. Under Olivia's visionary leadership, TAP is a transformative force in the field, providing accessible and affordable tools and resources for individuals on their integration journey. Olivia is deeply committed to making integration an integral part of the psychedelic experience, ensuring that individuals receive the support they need to translate their insights into lasting positive change. Through her work at TAP, Olivia is reshaping the landscape of psychedelic therapy, empowering individuals to harness the full potential of their transformative experience. So, as I was saying, when we first did the first take of this is the first time that I'm hearing about this. And I was wondering if you could share a little bit about the app. I also want to mention that Olivia facilitated a journey that I went through that I found was really helpful and transformative. And so I'm familiar with the integration process and how important of a role that is. So before we get into some of the things that you've overcome in your life, can you share an encapsulated version of a little bit about the app and what your intention is with that?
Yes. So I guess I'll start with what integration is, because that's actually like it's a buzzword that people in this industry really know well, but that other people don't quite understand. So the metaphor I like to use is that physical therapy is to hip surgery what integration is to psychedelic medicines. It is the core differentiator between having a long-term positive effect in your life or just reverting back to your old way of life. So integration is that physical therapy. Once you've kind of cleared out all of these dysfunctional neural pathways, you have this opportunity to create new behaviors, new mindsets, new relationships with people. And so you really want to maximize on that neuroplasticity that is forming directly after these sessions. I believe that integration is 80% application. It's taking what you learned in that journey and then applying it to your life by taking action to change the way that you show up for yourself. And so and the integration that follows is where we give people new information to listen to, podcasts, books, videos, because they've cleared up a lot of space by processing through years and years of trauma and memories. And our brain is like a computer. It starts running out of space eventually after, if we've experienced a lot of challenges or adversity or had heartbreak or grief or been disappointed and let down. And until we take the time to process all of that stuff, we start to run out of space. So with that newfound space that's opened up in your mind, you want to fill it in with stuff that's going to really help you to make the changes in your life that you're wanting. And so that's where the integration piece comes in. It is so critical to the success of these sessions. So that's what integration is. Because there is a nationwide shortage of therapists and facilitators in this country, a lot of people are experimenting with themselves, or they're going to maybe an ayahuasca retreat in South America, and then they don't have that follow-up support. So there is a lot of great stuff that can come from that, but they can get so much further with that integrative support. And so I realized that the best way to help people with that is to create this software platform that's going to provide instant access to those resources. We're gamifying the process. So if you can imagine Duolingo, it's essentially going to be like a Duolingo for self-discovery and activation of the mind and the heart. So instead of learning a language, you're learning how to maybe get through deep feelings of shame, perfectionism, people pleasing, maybe mother wounds, or what are some other common ones that you could come up with? We have a whole list of categories that you'd be able to pick, and then you'd be provided with a list of new information to absorb, but also somatic practices, exercises, and daily routines that you can do. And then the software is going to track your progress.
I love that idea. I think it's really useful and using technology in a positive way because, you know, the culture has been oversaturated with uh, screen time and apps and, Instagram, TikTok, all of this stuff. And there's so much negative content and things out there for people to latch on to. So having this sort of transformative tool to sort of balance that out, I think is a wonderful idea.
Thank you. Thank you. It's a huge learning curve for me. I do not have a tech background, and so I'm really relying on the community and people who do have experience to come in and support, because I believe the only way that we're going to accomplish this is through a collaboration, creating an ecosystem with the other facilitators and practitioners in this field coming together to really provide these resources to those in need.
Yeah. And does, besides using the app, will you be offering some sort of one-on-one, um, kind of, I don't know, if counseling or sort of support options
Great
as well
support.
through that?
Yes, exactly. So we'll have different levels of membership. So the free version, you'll just be working directly with your activation guide, which essentially is AI, and that will provide you with the ground support. It'll provide you with the exercises and prompts that you need. But if you pay a little additional every month, then you get access to an integration specialist. So you'd be able to book 1 to 4 sessions a month, depending on what's needed.
How far along are you with this app? Or, when can we expect it to be launched?
That's a great question. So we finished the wireframes. We just partnered with a development company who's gonna be working sort of as a technical co-founder for us to start with the development of it. But The idea is for it to be totally ready to go by August, which is when we're expecting MDMA therapy to be legalized.
Oh, wonderful. So let's get into, one or two things that you've overcome. You had your first journey, or in preparation for the journey. I think the person asked you if you wanted to, um, if there was some trauma, I forget the name of it, but there's some questions
The
that
ACE
help.
test.
What is it called?
The ACE test.
The ACE test. Yes, to see if there was trauma in your life, and your response was no, I don't have any trauma. But as you were taking the test, a lot of things were coming to the surface. So I was wondering if that would be a good place to start, or if there's something that you feel in your heart you wanted to share about that you had to overcome, whatever you feel to do.
Right. So I think I would like to tie it into the Activation Project, which is the organization that I started, and the three phases of the Activation Project. So first you have activate your mind, then activate your tribe, and activate the world. And I discovered this from my own process, my own experience of activation, as I call it. And that first phase, which is activating your mind, is what it means to really know yourself, to understand yourself, to be able to wake up out of this sort of autopilot, automatic reaction sort of life that we're living, where we're just going through the motions, we're reacting to things that are happening without any awareness of why that's happening. And what is actually so common, and what I found out later, is the understanding of things that affected your life and impacted you, like trauma. A lot of people don't have any awareness of the things that have created trauma, and usually have a perception of not having had any. A very common response I get in the work that I do is, oh yeah, it wasn't so bad. My parents did the best that they could. And then it turns out that they were totally neglected. They were latchkey kids. They spent most of their time by themselves, or their parents forgot to pick them up, from the school game, or maybe they got spanked really hard, but they were like, oh no, that's fine. Like spanking, that's what was done back then. Yes, it is what was done back then, but it's also scientifically linked to severe trauma. And that was one thing I didn't know. So in my perception, I'm thinking like trauma is PTSD, which is comes from combat and war and killing people and seeing people getting killed. And so I was like, that couldn't apply to me. And yet I had so much dysfunction in my life in so many different arenas. Behavioral dysfunction. I had a really big problem with rage and anger. So if I would get triggered, I would explode. And that's because I avoided sadness and feeling sad and grief. And so instead, it just came out as anger. My relationships were very challenging and difficult, and I would burn a lot of bridges. And so there was a lot of areas where I was like, there is something wrong with me, and I don't know why. I don't know what it is. And I don't know why there's nothing wrong with me, because in my mind, I'm like, well, I grew up a missionary. My mom was really loving. We lived communally. I learned other languages. I lived in other countries. Like, to me, like I had a leg up from most people. And I thought that I was actually very, I think privileged in the way that I was raised. And I still do believe that. However, my definition of privilege has drastically changed. So going through the first session, my own psychedelic therapy, and going through that ACE test that measures adverse childhood experiences, I realized that indeed I had experienced a very high level of trauma that most children do not experience. And it felt like this gigantic weight was lifted off of me, because I was carrying so much guilt and shame for all of the choices that I had made, and my problems, just with dysfunction in my life. And I realized that it was because of these experiences that had impacted me, that had created a certain level of what psychologists deem to be brain damage caused by trauma. So it just felt like just having that understanding was the first step to really, and knowing myself, knowing the things that had impacted me. And what I realized through all of this, through the work that I did with myself and the work that I did with other people, is that adversity is a really important part of life. And it's one of the main reasons why we're here. We're here to be challenged so that we can grow. Growth comes from challenge. Growth comes from navigating adversity and overcoming it. And so the people who have experienced high amounts of adversity and at the same time were resilient and overcame it, it creates superhumans. I mean, the people who have gone through the most adversity and have come out on the other side have superhuman capabilities. They have superhuman strength. And so the actual privilege comes from navigating that adversity and overcoming it, right? Because it gives you this everything you need to actually live a happy, well-balanced life. Perseverance, grit, gravitas. Privilege is not what most people think, that it comes from socioeconomic status or the color of your skin. That can actually be a handicap to people and create fragility. And that's what we're seeing right now with these very, very sheltered Gen Z, you know, that they are super sheltered, and then they're not able to overcome things, and they get addicted to heroin, and they get addicted to opiates and social media. So it's interesting, this paradox.
So when you had that moment of, oh wow, I do have this trauma. So it's not that something's wrong with me, and there's a reason for why I've been so reactive and flying into rage and things like that. What was your initial relationship to that part of yourself, and how has that changed throughout your own healing process?
So one of my ex-boyfriends named that part of me Oevelia, because she was so, I mean, she could just be mean and angry and hurtful and narcissistic and all the things, but that was my protector part. That was this part that was created to protect me from adversity, from all the sexual trauma I experienced. And that's what happens. We have these splits in our psyche where we create these other parts that are like, okay, I don't believe or trust your ability to take care of us. So I need to come out in this very strong and forceful way to be the protector, because you don't got us, so I have to get us, right? So I really did not like that part of myself. I saw all of the destruction that she had caused in my life, and I wanted to get rid of her. And that was my first reaction. And that's a reaction that a lot of people have. Oh, if I could just kill this part of myself, or this part needs to die, and this part, but that it's the wrong approach, because that part doesn't die. That part is our fierce defender. And when we try to suppress it or get rid of it or squash it, it oftentimes comes out stronger in other ways. And that is actually what happened to me after the experience. I noticed that that part came out in full force, and it left me like, what is happening? Like I thought the awareness of this part was going to help me to get rid of her. But I had a friend who was very very keyed into integration practices and parts integration and doing that work, and was like, you need to integrate her. So it's about shifting out of this place of disdain or hate or disgust with this part of you, and shifting that into empathy and compassion, and understanding that that part has your best interest at mind. Like she's doing all of those things to help me and to protect me. So shifting those negative feelings about myself and about that specific part of me into love and understanding and compassion is the best way to integrate that part of you. And so it was a long process of continuing to try to convert those feelings of anger or self-hate or mistrust into acceptance and then love. So I believe acceptance is sort of the gateway, it's the opening to love. And the idea is to find unconditional love for all parts of us, even the parts that are dysfunctional.
So the relationship you have to that part of yourself, and you were talking about the process of wanting to get rid of that part, and then and then learning to get to this place of loving that part. So for someone who's watching, who's going through something similar, is going through becoming aware of these parts of themselves, um, how did you address the physical sensations that sometimes grip the body? That fear, that diaphragm, that sort of um, when the body's in survival mode, and sometimes sometimes it can feel hard to respond to that in a very loving and compassionate way. So what is your process with working with that?
That's a good question because you're right. Sometimes when we get triggered into our fight, flight, freeze mode, it's a physiological response that can be really hard to override in the moment. So when you're first starting down this path, and the idea is just to pay attention or to become aware of what's going on. What are the physiological responses that tend to come up? Is it a tightening of the chest? Is it accelerated heartbeat? Is it a really intense feeling of not being safe? And you might not be able to do anything about it in the moment, but until after it's passed. And then you can stop and look back and, oh, I was really triggered in that moment, and do some reflection afterwards. Like what was coming up for me? What did that remind me of? When's the first time I felt that way? I was actually just listening to this really great podcast this morning with Peter Crone, and he said one of his most famous quotes actually is, life brings you people and circumstances or experiences to reveal to us where we are not free. And that is all those triggers are. Everything in life that triggers us is just a warning sign, or it's like a flashing arrow that's showing us where we still have some wounding, or where, it usually ties back to 3 core wounds of abandonment, shame, or betrayal. And so it usually is going to relate to one of those 3. So I would just be easy on yourself if you can't like work through the trigger right in that moment, right? First step is awareness. Oh, I was really triggered. What does that mean? If you were like me and were very reactive in an explosive way and said harmful things to somebody in the moment, finding the humility and the courage to go back and say, hey, I'm really sorry. I was experiencing a really deep trigger. My life was built on second and third chances, not only in life, but with people and relationships. So I'm very grateful and thankful to all the people who allowed me to come up and say that I was sorry and apologize. So that's the other component that I want to talk about is there's a certain amount that we can do by ourselves, right? Like sitting with it, reflecting on it. What does this remind me of? Okay, can I help myself to feel safe in this moment? But there's also a lot that can be done in partnership or in relationship. Most of our wounds are relational wounds. Actually, Esther Perel says all of them are relational wounds, you know, so they were all created within the dynamic of a relationship. And so there's so many that can also be healed in a relationship. So including people in the process of what's going on, your partner or your friends or your kids or whoever you're, because that usually those triggers are going to come out with people that are closest to you. I mean, they can randomly happen with a stranger when you're in traffic or something like that. But we tend to reveal our like really shadowy protector part sides to people that are closest to us. Ironically, because we usually feel the most safe to reveal those parts, or the attachment is causing us to want to push them away. But having that awareness of knowing yourself to know what your triggers look like, and usually around the things that trigger you can help you to communicate that to other people so that they can be aware of the process and that they can maybe even help you work through it too. Sometimes having someone be like, hey, I can tell that you're feeling a little triggered and anxious right now. Do you mind if I just breathe with you and help you to relax your nervous system? You know, so having someone that can support you through that is also helpful. And if you're by yourself, you know, just be easy with yourself. If you have that reaction, the more permission you can give yourself, the better. So much of our life, we've been restricted with things like, you know, especially as children, we've been told not to be too loud or not to be too much of this or too much of that. And so it's just this constant process of suppressing, suppressing, suppressing. So allowing yourself, giving yourself permission to feel certain things is going to be the fastest way to move it through.
I find that that allowing that space for those reactions to be there and being gentle with oneself is so important. And the conditioning that you talked about that we've took on from childhood, don't, like don't express anger, don't, when I was a kid and I expressed anger, I was shut down, but underneath that anger was a lot of pain. And I think also, as for men, it's sort of tied into this sort of wrong idea of what's masculine. We tend to suppress our emotions and to, not share about how we feel and have a hard time being vulnerable. So do you find with people that you work with, do you come up against that issue?
Certainly. Yeah. Yeah. Especially with men, you know, having varying degrees of allowing themselves to feel a certain way or to be vulnerable. And the other component of that is for them to have people that they do feel safe around and that they do trust to be able to express those emotions and know that they're not going to be judged or that someone's not going to have like an adverse reaction to it, because that can just perpetuate the cycle of like closing up and not feeling safe. So really thinking about who you can call as like a life team for yourself of people that you can process things with, that are not going to have a more adverse reaction to something than you, or to oversize the emotion, is important as well.
So, Olivia, I know we're coming. I want to wrap up soon because I know you have another call. I just wanted to do some rapid fire questions. If you could instantly master any skill, what would it be and why?
Right now, it would be I would instantly master the skill of being a CTO.
A
And
CTO, what is that?
a chief technical officer for my software platform, and just like if I could plug into the matrix and just like download all the information I needed, it would be to build technology to
Oh,
create
great.
this app.
Great answer. What is the weirdest talent or skill you possess? Or a talent or skill that most people don't know about?
I have a really intimate, I don't know if this is a talent or a skill, but I have a very intimate connection with time. I really like, I feel seconds. I know exactly how much time is passing. I know exactly how long it's going to take me to do anything and to get anywhere. So I'm also really good with directions. And so even when I try to be late, I cannot be late. It's like, it's interesting how cognizant of time I am every passing second.
Great. If you could time travel to any era, past or future, where would you go and why?
I've always been like very drawn to the Victorian era. Like Jane, like I would want to go into a Jane Austen novel, like
Oh,
Pride
okay.
and Prejudice.
Yeah,
Uh, because there is just something so eloquent about their use of the English language and like how all their lives were just centered around what it felt to be like this very poetic dialogue.
wonderful. Two more questions. What's one piece of advice you wish you could give to your younger self?
Start doing psychedelic healing a lot earlier.
Great answer. Okay, what's the best piece of advice you've ever received?
I think the best advice that I don't know that I've received, but is just like a understanding that I have found to be so true is that there is no such thing on earth as one size fits all.
Great.
And as humans, we get so caught up in trying to find like to find the one thing, the one truth, like this is it, this is the way to go, this is the way to eat, this is the way to be, this is the way to live. And it's different for every single subjective human experience.
Great. Wonderful. So, Olivia, that wraps up our rapid fire questions. And it was a pleasure speaking with you today. How can people get in touch with you or work with you or find out what you're doing next?
I prefer to be emailed. So my email address is become.activated@gmail.com. And my
Wonderful.
website is theactivationproject.com.
Great. Thank you so much. And thank you, everyone, for
As
listening.
we propel ourselves out of this stage of reality, out of this polarity, out of this aggression, out of this confinement, out of this division and collision, out of this, and into this place of love. This love where we are bringing down the energy from above and bringing up the energy from below and meeting in the middle. This place of, I don't know.